bubble one. The bubble one is great, but the problem
So it's really nice to have this opportunity of doing a one-person show in an art fair, because I've found that over the last 10 years I've been making individual works that go off to art fairs and they have no context with each other. So I decided when I was given this opportunity to do a one-person show, I would make a body of work which really sort of related to each other. And I'm showing it here at Salon 94. Jeannie Greenberg, the owner of the gallery, is someone who I got close to on a reality show. She was a permanent judge and I was a temporary judge of a show called Work of Art. It was a Bravo show. So I just find that already funny that I found my gallery from when I was on a reality show. So the pieces, a lot of the pieces include my nephew, who is 10 years old, and he was a wonderful model, and I had to do some, body casts, and that took a long time, and he was covered with gook for, 15, 20 minutes at a time. But most of the pieces deal with this idea of a divide. In the case of the piece behind me, Magnum Opus, it's a digital divide. It's a divide of rich and poor, which is getting even more and more exaggerated at this point. So you've got this little boy who's making an iPod turn so that it actually displays an image constantly, but it's having to right itself with as the movement happens. And that's actually the mechanism is called a Geneva Mechanism, which was developed in Geneva for every clock in the 1600s, and it's a device that I use a lot, a mechanism, but I was really interested in this sort of loss of innocence that is happening around the time of 10 years old. In another piece called Lost by One, there is the child is actually manipulating his legs. He's divided in half, and his legs are doing a kind of balletic movement, very beautiful movement. So there's a kind of brutality and an elegance to all of these figurative pieces. There's a piece called Lost Boy 2, which has the same boy who's behind making a mechanism where there's an ear that's been ripped off of an adult that's being dipped into a bubble mix, and then he's got a tube coming out of his mouth and he's blowing bubbles through what's called an ear gauge. An ear gauge is this sort of neo-primitive manipulation that people are doing with their ears now, where they take their lobes and they open them up. So this sort of, here's this again, a divide between the sort of maybe technological society culture and this sort of more a technological society which is actually hearkening back to a neo-primitive kind of, primitive, pre-technological society with the ear gauges. I wanted all of these pieces to sort of look like they almost kind of like in some sort of sci-fi situation drop down to earth and got uncrated and became these almost relics of some other society. The piece right here, Fallen Hero, is actually it's a cast of my foot, and it's in a snowboarding boot, and then it's sort of presented kind of like a Roman ruin or something, but it's activated by a proximity switch, and the toe moves, and when the toe moves, there's actually a fog machine that's inside which brings smoke up through the chamber of the foot, and it relates to prosthetics and the sort of the whole industry that's around the war right now of soldiers coming back and not having legs, not having arms. More and more soldiers are living from trauma, unlike World War II, World War I, Vietnam. They're actually surviving the trauma, but they're coming back with body parts gone. So there's a lot of body parts in the show. There's a piece. This piece is one of the more interesting sort of psychological pieces. It's called Cooler. I'm sorry. It's a cooler, but it's called Live in Your Head. And inside the cooler, this typical Coleman cooler is a very psychological, trippy space. But it's housed in what's really a very public, non-private situation of a picnic cooler. And in some ways, one of the other things that really unites a lot of this new work that I'm doing is is something that I always swore that I would not do. So I've spent 30 years making pieces that expose the mechanisms. And so a lot of these pieces are actually relating to 18th century automatons, where you'd have a girl playing the piano, like say Jacques Droze's automatons, and that the base itself, the pedestal, would be where the mechanism was. And so a lot of these mechanisms are actually hidden inside the pedestals. So if you come over here, I'll show you, like this is, you know, that's what's making the magic happen, and that's the fog machine, and yeah, so there's a kind of, you know, up there there's a solenoid which is triggered from the Arduino, and there's actually the fog is, I could get that too. So here, this is the smallest piece in the show. It's called Smoker, and it's an $18,000 incense burner, essentially. So that's what makes the kid smoke his cigarette. And inside, and actually this video, so it's using a brand new MacBook Pro to show a video of my nephew. And this, in a funny way, is actually the last piece I made in the show. And all of the ideas in all of the animatronic pieces come together in this video, where he's actually doing many of the mechanisms that he's doing in the sculptures. He didn't know why he was doing them in the video shoot, but so it's all very, you know, very playful, and he's a superhero in the video. Let's see. So here's Lost Boy 2. Lost Boy 2 really has this sort of like quite dark interior. It's a It's his chalkboard paint. He's drawn a couple of stars on it. This is his. It's his domain. It's his spot. And he, you know, here's this incredible, you know, binary effect with this kid who's actually blowing bubbles, which is a very playful kid-like thing to do. Except he's blowing bubbles through this ear gauge, and technically this was actually the toughest piece to make. So, you know, there's actually a fan in here. There's actually, to make this happen, in the fan, the speed of the fan, the power of the fan had to be very specific in order to make that happen. I actually had a much bigger ear gauge at first, and then the bubbles were enormous, and so this all, you know, I started all this work in June or July, and with the idea that it would all be shown together at this Fahrenheit. So this is a piece, actually, that's, we titled the entire show after this piece, The Future Was Perfect. And this is a trope that I've used a lot. It's a kind of a sci-fi trope of a stuffed bird that can no longer fly and is on a moving platform. And in this case, he actually has a camera just off of his shoulder. And the image is meant to reference a kind of German romantic image of a Caspar David Friedrich painting or something, where there's a kind of romanticism of the figure looking out on the sublime. And in this case, the sublime is the art fair and us and the world around it. But it's all housed, typical of my work, you know, with the high art and low art, and the combination of those two. There's a water cooler. These are just, you know, bathroom tiles that I smashed, and he's got a helmet and a bazooka, so he's ready for any shit that he might find coming his way. He's ready to rock and roll.